He believes success only matters when it's shared, a principle he has lived throughout his extraordinary journey. From co-founding HCL to shaping India's startup ecosystem as a mentor and guide, he has worn many hats: entrepreneur, technologist, investor, and advisor, but never a disciplinarian. Often called a father figure to generations of founders, Arjun Malhotra is known not just for building companies, but for building people. With an incredible memory, a vast global network, and an unmatched responsiveness, he stays deeply connected, engaging with thousands across the world every single day. This is not just a story of success, it's a story of impact, relationships, and legacy. How are you, Mr. Arjun Malhotra? How are you, Sirji?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, straight to the question. Now, many things are happening with AI, with political scenario of the world. How you are seeing Silicon Valley in coming time from an immigrant perspective?
Well, right now there's going to be a temporary shortage, the way it looks, because of the tightening of the visa situations. And specifically, I can talk about India. So, for example, in Delhi, the earliest interview date is 2027. And so, a lot of people who plan to come here on student and work visas are actually going to not be able to come here. And so, a lot of work is going to have to shift to the locations where these people are available. So I don't think inventiveness or the that part of Silicon Valley will change, but the place where they'll get it all done will probably start moving to other locations. Some of it had moved to Silicon uh, Hills in Texas, to Austin, and other places over time. But I think now that it'll move overseas, whether it goes to India or it goes to other places where you have talent available, which can work. Already in India, you're seeing the number of GCCs, as they call them, going up considerably. And the work there is not just IT services. There's a lot of IP level work that's going on there. And so you're going to see that happen. And in a way, it's not a bad thing because at a lower cost, you'll get a lot more work done. The pandemic has already taught us how to work remotely and be productive. And so when you combine all these, the work's going to stay where the people are, where the raw material is, where the talent is. And so that's what you're going to see. Silicon Valley won't change. It'll change in the sense, hopefully, be less crowded and all that stuff. But the work will go on. The breakthroughs are going to come from here. That's not going to change very quickly.
Right, right. Okay. Now, with this AI, definitely a lot of people who are stressed a little bit about their children's career. I mean, what they should study, how they should study. A lot of talk going on about Indian education system. Some of them are doing good, some of them are not that good, etc., etc. So, from a mentor perspective, what advice you would like to give to the students, let's say, who are in high schools now?
Yeah. So actually, if you go back some 40, 50 years, when computers first came out, microprocessors first came out, basically the PC computers became everyone could use them instead of being in sort of data centers or computer centers with false flooring and all that stuff. People, if you look at it today, if you know how to use a computer, you've got a job, right? People who don't know how to use computers are having a struggle. It's called not keeping up with the digital revolution. I think that logic continues. So while they may, and I remember fighting unions who said jobs will go away when computers come in, et cetera, et cetera. When we first got in computers in the mid 70s, early 80s, I think you're seeing the same paranoia here. Whereas the computers took, say, 30 years or some long period of time to become part of mainstream, I think in AI, it's going to be a lot quicker. And so you're going to see those sawtooth in jobs be there very quickly. But I think ultimately, my view is if you know how to use AI platforms, you know how to leverage them, there'll be more jobs because there's so much more data that's going to be available, not just as numbers, as text, as video, all sorts of data that will need to be analyzed and predict. You'll use AI to do analysis. I think the other thing we've got to look at is when you say what advice are you going to give students, you got to look at where AI is going to be used, in which domains and for what. What will it make more efficient, make better? There's a lot of hype around it right now, and we haven't seen too many results. Everyone expects a lot of things to happen, but they haven't yet happened. I would say if I was a high school student, knowing what I know, I would opt for the healthcare industry, genetics, because I think the maximum impact in the short term is going to happen in medicine, in care, in how things are being done in that industry. It's been very expertise oriented till now. A simple thing like reading MRIs or X-rays, AI can do a much more efficient job than even the best radiologist, in the sense that we don't trust it right now, but AI can keep millions of images and do analysis from there when it sees a new image. I would presume a good radiologist would be able to remember 10,000, maybe 15, 20,000 images and do the analysis. So what AI does today and what it basically does is when it gets an image, it points out to the 5, 6, 7 places where you're likely to see a problem. And then you have a radiologist look at it and decide what is the issue. And as ML makes the application more smarter, if I use the word, you're saying more intelligent becomes tough. But as it becomes smarter, you'll see that it'll become more and more accurate in terms of prediction. And at some stage, the radiologist would depend on AI to tell it what to do, right? Rather than trying to use their brains themselves. It's pretty much like what's happened to calculations. Today, how many people do calculations in their head? Everyone's got a calculator of some kind. And so you just do, even if it's 100 divided by 2, most people after doing it realize, hey, why am I doing this? I could have done it in my head. But that skill is going away. And you're dependent so much on the machine. That's going to happen in some of these areas. Some areas will take much longer, some will go much quicker. In fact, I know of projects that are going on today where people are developing portable low-cost MRI machines that can go to rural areas, villages in India, for example, and do MRI and then transmit the image to someone who can do analysis at a remote place. You've got low-cost mass spectrographs coming up that'll identify or be able to identify microplastics, be able to identify heavy metals in water, things like that. And so you're going to see those devices coming up, and then you're going to see people having to write software or whatever is needed, applications to be able to analyze the data that's coming from there. A lot of changes are going to come, like the internet changed a lot of industries. AI is going to change a lot of industries, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. So
Mm.
just remember in 99, 2000, when e-commerce came, everyone thought brick and mortar would die. Today, brick and mortar is still alive, right? E-commerce is there, but brick and mortar is alive. I think something similar would happen with AI. It's not that traditional what we do is going to die and AI will take over the world, but both will coexist at some level, and more things will go towards artificial intelligence helping us take a decision. You can't take the human out of it. Uh,
Mm. As you mentioned about this healthcare thing, I was listening to some futuristic lectures, and one of the other areas they are saying is logistics, which is absolutely no one kind of touched it for last 5 decades, 6 decades or something. So they are saying that's another area major changes might come.
I think a lot of logistics we did through linear programming. In fact, simplex or whatever more complicated method you used, which were working on computers, the if then else of logistics, AI will be able to solve much quicker and faster. Number one. Number two, I think you also can't ignore the technologies that are coming. And I'll talk about quantum, which is knocking on the doors right now. Quantum, so computers as we know them today are deterministic. 2 plus 2 has to be equal to 4. Quantum is probabilistic. 2 plus 2 doesn't necessarily have to be 4. Depends on various things. It can be something else. And so now you're adding quantum type probabilistic thinking to AI. You're going to get much more intelligent kind of analysis that artificial intelligence would be able to do. So that's one thing we've got to look at and see how that's going to impact us. Because now you're getting closer to cognitive thinking than the simple AI system can do. The second thing I think is nanotechnology is going to be coming also. Now, whether 5 years, 10 years, anyone's guess. But from the little I know and the little I've read, the science of nanoparticles is not the traditional Newtonian physics. It's different. So to be able to work in that area, I have to unlearn what I've learned and relearn that new science. It's not an easy job, but that you'll have to do that. And while we're seeing some nanotechnology products available today, the fiber body on a Dreamliner, on a Tesla car, which is lighter and stronger than steel. I forget the name, but there's a sunblock, which has nanocrystals which reflect the sunlight back and don't let it come onto your skin. And so you're seeing some of those things, but they're just products that are using the stuff that the properties of nano. But to understand the physics of nano, I think we're going to have to relearn, get a refresh in how we look at physics, and that's not going to be easy.
Okay. Another, as a mentor, please give us startup entrepreneurs or who wants to do something, what they should do. The reason I'm asking, because in and out of business is becoming kind of a monthly game now, not even yearly sometimes. I mean, where should we stick or how long should we stick?
Yeah, so the key is what you want to do. If you just want to create something that someone will buy, you're hoping at least someone will buy, then you go and solve a niche, maybe a large niche, but you go in and solve that and keep it at that so that you trouble someone's market share and they buy you either to just close you down or to actually add that to the repertoire of whatever they're selling. If you want to build a corporation, you want to build a company that quote unquote will live forever, then you have to look at it very differently. You have to look at the people, you have to look at the business model, you have to look at the structure, you have to look at the market you're going to address. In terms of getting a good team, what you've got to make sure is that they're all focused in one direction. You've got to have a common communication that everyone buys into, right? And I was going to say, you probably heard your friends, a lot of them complaining that I work really hard, but no one recognizes, gives me the recognition for the hard work I do. Now, hard work isn't really the key thing. Are you working hard in the direction in which the company wants? And that happens because a lot of companies don't clearly define the direction in which you want to go. If you give people a confused direction, then you'll have that kind of problem where you're working very hard and you feel no one's acknowledging the hard work you're putting in. You're not getting the increments of benefit or whatever, right? So you have to be clear. Everyone has to be clear on, and it's very easy with a small team because you can call them into a room and do it. But the minute an organization grows and you've got thousands of people, that becomes a big, big problem on making sure everyone has a common goal and is communicating, because as communication goes down the channel, it gets distorted, right? And that noise then confuses people. Building and sustaining an organization is a very different skill task than starting a company and growing it to a certain size. Okay. And so a lot of people don't have the energy, patience, ability in some cases to be able to build an organization that'll, quote unquote, as I put it, last forever. And so they look for an exit. And it's nice. They earn a fair amount of money. They are doing well. That becomes their key thing. It's not, hey, I want to get a name, create an organization that'll live on forever or whatever. So, and I'm not saying what is right or wrong. Both of them are good, and they're people who should solve problems immediately that give us, and they're people who create organizations or create companies that have a long life, and both of them are needed.
How you are seeing will happen about Indian diaspora globally? The reason I'm asking because of two things. First is a bit of a white right wing politics, and second is Chinese development speed.
I mean, at least the white right wing politics, as you call it, is a temporary phenomenon. Ultimately, everyone who sees their quote unquote power getting diluted in some form becomes antsy about it. And it's more likely the people who are insecure that they get antsy. And so I don't see there are problems, obviously, that happen. They happen all over the world. Ethnic groups tend to clash. There are times, cycles that take place from there was a time when Asia had a large part of the world's GDP, then it shifted out west. Now you're seeing a transition going back to Asia for that GDP. And obviously, it's not that the people in Asia were happy about this transition. Now the people in the West are not going to be happy about the transition back. But as long as their lifestyle doesn't get impacted and they keep updated with what's going on. And right now, what's happening, at least in the US, is immigration allowed only qualified people. Australia too. You had to, if you came from Asia, you had to be a doctor, engineer, a lawyer, whatever. You had to be qualified. Whereas if you came from other parts of the world, you could come without those qualifications. Now, over time, you see the difference because suddenly the people with qualifications are are holding bigger jobs, are getting earning more money, and a lot of them then end up buying big cars, buy bigger houses, or houses overlooking the water, or whatever is
Mhm.
considered socially superior. And that rankles people who feel that they are entitled but are not getting what they are. And that's a problem that's going to happen. It's going to happen in any country where you create artificial biases of that kind, right? And that's been part of the problem. And so, we got to end up living with it. It'll get
Mhm.
sorted out. In my view, these things don't sustain. A good example is Burma. When they had that revolution many, many years ago, they wanted all the Indians to leave. And they put them on a boat and they were actually going to send them off. When suddenly they realized that they had no engineers, they had no doctors left. And so they went and pulled all the Indian engineers and doctors and said, you can't leave. I have first cousins in Burma because my father's family came from Burma. And, they stayed on. He was an engineer. My cousins had married. My dad's brother was an engineer. My cousins had married doctors, and their kids are doctors, and it's all, uh, and they are part of society in Burma. They're still not how to say speak Burmese. They've got Burmese names, but they're still ethnic Indian, and so these are things that happen, and they keep happening. It's just one of those things.
Right. Okay. A couple of questions around VCs. Many founders think that VCs bet on ideas. Which is more important, the human, the pedigree, or the idea?
I don't know, every VC probably has their own way of evaluating and prioritizing what they want. If I had to invest, I would first look at the founder and the team and then look at the idea. Both are important, but I think more critical is the person, the founder, the team that the founder can get. The best ideas with the weakest teams are never going to work. But yet, not so great idea with a good team could become a home run. And so I would look for the team. I think that's far more important, in my
Right.
view.
So then when it comes to human, then how you see the human conviction, clarity, resilience, sometimes the ego also come into the picture. What is important or how you evaluate that?
So, when you are a startup founder, you can't have an ego because you take decisions all the time, and a lot of them are wrong. And the quicker you accept that you took the wrong decision and share it with your team and change your decision, the better off you are. So obviously, when you evaluate people, you try and look at them and see who will be more flexible, who's open to ideas, who's willing to recruit people smarter than him or her, because that's how you make a team. A lot of people talk about successful entrepreneurs who've grown billion-dollar companies and say, but they have egos. Yeah, when you get to $1 billion, you can have an ego. But when you're at less than 1 million, you can't have an ego, in my view. And so anyone who has an ego is a big no in my book for a startup, right? Because startups don't need power orientation, they need achievement orientation. And so that's what I would look at.
Because you are talking to so many entrepreneurs over the decades, can you really differentiate between bold vision, delusion, or disciplined optimism? Because sometimes as an entrepreneur, I also get confused whether I am resilient or I'm just like or talking to a wall.
So I am fairly lucky that way. I worked in HCL. We recruited a lot of people from there. I worked in TechSpan, Headstrong. Again, we recruited a lot of people there. I studied at the Doon School and IIT. So when people come to me, large number of them come from some of these backgrounds. And so I have a good idea of what their background is, and I can check with other people who worked with them or who studied with them as to what kind of people they are. So I have that advantage. 99% of the people who come to me because there's some common background. Either they're from IIT or they are ex-HCL or they're ex-Headstrong, stuff like that. And so I have a much better way of getting their profile, to
Right.
evaluate their profile. And so I'm the wrong person to ask if someone walks off the street, how would you evaluate them? I don't have too many of them come to me. And even if they come through a reference of someone who knows me and has told them to approach me. Right. And so, it's a question I'd love to answer, but I don't have that experience, right? On
No,
how
okay.
you,
So you
but you
you
have to judge. You have to make
yeah.
a judgment. Like when you do business with someone, you want to judge whether that person will, how that person would do business. My logic is, look, I don't want to do business with someone who doesn't give me his word or her word and doesn't keep it. I'll get burnt once, but after that, I'm not going to do business with them. Right. So you learn how to judge people. You learn how to, where to be, how careful in terms of how you're structuring your deal, your payments. You're not right all the time, but over a period of time, you become better at doing it than when you start. And I think that's what most people also tend to rely on their judgment rather than try to do an evaluation. I mean, you try and get references when you recruit people. It's again the same thing. You want someone to verify that what you've done, your judgment in the interview, are they kind of confirming it or do they have something completely different to what you assessed?
Mm. Okay. Another thing is career shift. And I have done that. I came to business because I just didn't want to work in an organization and I didn't bring my past life into my business. So, and it was really, really hard. Okay. And when, as an employee, I was working as an analyst and I wanted to become a project manager, that was also like massive hard task. Or industry change. I did that from IT to banking and banking to telecom. Oh my gosh. So this upskilling, reskilling, sidewise move, it happens, it's exhausting. But at the end of the day, it's kind of your career, your problem. Just adapt. Okay. Now, in this day and age, because all these barriers or all these boundaries of careers are kind of diluting, one person has to do many things. Or as an entrepreneur, we have to do many things, right? Sales, marketing, writing, everything. So if someone has a knack of something, maybe they didn't manifest before, with this new technology or in this forward thinking way, how we can at least give them bit of a space, or how they can manifest what they want to manifest.
In my time, the pressure was to get a job. You needed security. That was the main objective. Over a period of time, that has changed, and rightly so. In countries like India, I can talk about that. It was very different in the US, and I really don't have a feel of the time when I was growing up because I grew up in India. But yeah, it started from like my parents were very clear. They said, as long as you're studying, we'll support you. But the minute you finish your study, you have to stand on your own feet. You have to find a job. And so when I, after 5 years of working with DCM, which was a major conglomerate, I decided to start a company. Six of us co-founded HCL. All my parents were fine. They didn't say anything, but all my relatives, uncles and aunts thought I was crazy. You know, they thought, why would you leave a secure job in a large company where you seem to be doing okay and get into something that no one's ever done in the family before? Funny thing was, 2 years later, when the company started doing well, all of them took credit for it. Said, we told you so, kind of thing. So I think you've got to follow your passion. I mean, today you have much more opportunity to do that. Quite unlike when I grew up or I was in college and graduated. You've got to follow your passion. You've got to, because that's where you'll be happy. Even if you're not successful, at least you'll be happy, right? That's my whole point. So I tell people, I look, when you ask that question, how do you judge people? I look at the passion in them because the key is, look, he's passionate about something, he wants to change the world in that particular area. Even if he doesn't hit a home run, become a financially very successful, at least he'll be satisfied. He'll be happy. He won't be stressed mentally in that area. So today, a lot of kids work for a year somewhere, then switch because a lot of them. I mean, let me put it this way: when you were in college or when you left college, did you know what you wanted to do? You don't. I don't think kids today also know that. And so, but today they've got the opportunity to jump jobs, look at different things, and come hopefully find out what they want to do. Right. In our time, and again, in fact, if you read it in your early 40s, late 30s, mid 40s, everyone, or most people, went through what is called a midlife crisis. When you leave college, you want to change the world, do all sorts of things. Then you get into a job, you get into the rat race, you get to 40, half your life is over. You say, what have I done? I haven't changed anything. And you sort of, that's the midlife crisis. Oh, what do I do? I hope the new generation will not have that many people going through a midlife crisis because by the time they get to that age, they would have found what they wanted to do and they would be happy, content in whatever they're doing. And I hope it's not only financial. See, there's a generation that chased money all the time. I think a lot of kids today are chasing satisfaction, are chasing things other than money. And while money is important, you've got to have enough to survive and live comfortably. I think priorities in kids are changing, and a lot of them feel that they want to make a difference in some way, change the world, climate, you know, sustainability, whatever other things you can think of. And that's a great thing because they will save the world, unlike what our generation have done, where we sort of got this climate, got global warming. We've created a lot of stuff that I think future generations have to make sure that they can try and reverse.
Right. Okay. So we are almost at the end of it. So the last question, which is a little big question, because of my mental health, like consulting business, I got a bit of a win because of my lived experience. And this lived experience, many people are calling it as a skin in the game, or in mental health, Bikram Patel said that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often farthest from the power. I'm a big believer of this lived experience thing. And as we are doing more and more things, we are having experience in many sectors. For example, now I'm doing podcasts. So I know how to question. I'm editing. So I know a little bit of editing. Okay, maybe I'm not Sachin Tendulkar in that, but little bit of experience. But in the real corporate world, I see there are many people who probably have just a degree or they can speak or some liaison with some people. This business coach, for example, half of them they didn't do business. They didn't burn their hands, but they are giving consulting, they're giving advices. How we can make this change so that more lived experience people in their own domain can come and contribute because at least they can pour their heart into it.
So, you're very right. You need people who've been in the trenches, so to say, to be the ones who come and tell you what to do. Unfortunately, not too many of them have the verbal skills to be able to translate their experiences and then their learnings into something that'll get through to other people. Yet there are people who have that skill who've never been in the trenches, which is why you see some of them talk about doing things or giving advice, whereas they've never done something like that themselves. So I think those are things that are going to stay. Things are changing, and I'll give you again India's example. The University Grants Commission insists that to become a teacher, a professor in a university, you've got to have a PhD at minimum, right? Now, I don't have a PhD, for example. I'm a simple BTech honors from IIT Kharagpur. But they've changed it now. And now like IITs can get what are called professors of practice. So because I have that experience in, let's say, management or IT or whatever, I can go in and, if they think I'm suitable, I can go in and teach a course on the stuff that I have practiced, which overcomes this academia being theoretical only kind of thing. Now, the motivation in India came from the fact that there weren't enough there weren't enough professors who and there were too many students. And so they needed to get more teachers, if I use that term, into the system. And this was a simple way of doing it. And in India, people retire really early in life, 55 in that area. So they're still very young in today's age, and they can obviously take courses and teach and stuff like that. And that's starting to happen. And for a lot of people who've retired, even here, they want to share their knowledge. And so teaching is a good way of trying to do that, whether you do a few lectures a week or even a full semester. Right. And so you're starting to see that happen. And it will ultimately, students who will graduate will become more, if I use the word, relevant for industry instead of just being theoretical. In fact, I'll give you my classic example. When I joined the Delhi Cloth and General Mills Company, DCM, as a senior management trainee, first year was we had a couple of weeks of classes in, say, production engineering. And then you had to go to one of the plants and do a project for 6 weeks. And because you were a senior management trainee, you reported to the general manager of the plant who gave you the project, and he was your guide. And I was sent to their old textile mill at Badahindurao in Delhi to do a project. And as I was going to meet the general manager, there was this bullock cart with kapas, which is the waste coming out. And I had to actually flatten myself against the wall. I was much slimmer then, and let this bullock cart with waste go by. And I thought to myself, I'm going to design a material handling plant for this mill. And so when I talked to the GM and I said, that's what I want to do, he said, go ahead. And so I looked at robotic and all sorts of things. 6 weeks later, when I gave my report, I said that is the most cost effective way of doing it, is that bullock cart. Right. So learning. I had come from a point where I thought I'll give an automated, robotic thing with carriers going around and all that stuff. After you do your project and look at what the reality on the ground, and you look at the fact that, look, not I'm not going to spend billions of dollars and millions of rupees trying to do something. This is the most cost effective way. You can't argue about it. And so it gets you down to earth very quickly. I think DCM, that senior management training scheme, was fantastic for that because it got you down to reality from my theoretical background when I graduated very quickly in areas that we weren't really taught. We were taught production management, but things like marketing and finance and stuff. As an engineer, you weren't taught that.
I saw it in US and in Australia also things are happening as you said, like more and more industry people later half of their life they are joining universities and this industry and education mix up is getting more and more. And maybe from there is a chance that it can ripple down to the corporates, this lived experience people. Maybe.
Yeah, both things would happen because the minute, let's say, I go in from after I've retired from a company and I talk to people and I see the work they're doing, and I think, oh, this would be relevant to what our people were doing and our customers in the company. I will then call someone there in the company and say, why don't you look at this and see if there's synergies here and come and explore it. And you're going to see more and more of that happen. And ultimately, the way it'll start is they'll give a project and see how the university performs. If I give it today, at least in India, I don't get a timeline. I get a budget, but I don't get a timeline when it'll finish. And for industry, that's a complete no-no. But if I'm there, I would advise them, and hey, you got to put a timeline, get a Gantt chart made, see who's responsible, as I put it, both in HCL and Headstrong, when you have a project, you've got to have one neck to squeeze if something goes wrong. Who's the neck, kind of thing. And that tends to work because then that person makes sure that things are on time. And if they're not, they escalate it in time so that someone can come in and fix whatever the issues are or that are causing the delay. So yeah, that worked for us.
Right, right. So hopefully, people like you, people like lived experience more and more will shape the humanity for good down the line. Thank you, Sergi. Thank you for your time.
A lot of younger people than me. I'm not going to be around for too long, but yeah, you need to get young people, at least 10, 15 years younger, maybe more, who actually come in and start dictating. And they've got to stay relevant. Technology is changing so fast. I still remember when I got the first computer home in the mid 70s, say 77 or so. I still remember my daughter was 3 years old. She's 51 now. Uh, my mother said in her lifetime, she's seen the telephone, the radio, the TV, come into the house. And now she's seeing a computer come in. And the question she asked me was when her granddaughter was her age, what did I think was going to be in the house? And I told her, look, if I knew I wouldn't be working for a living, I'd be writing books and giving lectures, telling people. But yeah, and technology, who would have thought that a greeting card, how should I put it, the CPU power on a greeting card which you open and says happy birthday, blah, blah, whatever it says, a singing greeting card has more power in its CPU than an IBM 360. So who would have thought that we would get to that stage?
Right.
Bill Gates said, who needs more than 640K when the first PCs came out, right? People have made those statements. And a lot of very smart, intelligent, successful people. But technology keeps galloping. I mean, where would you get a disk you can hold in your hand that had 4 terabytes? It's happening. Whereas earlier, a disk used to be memory used to be huge, and now you get them on little chips. So, yeah, and technology will keep galloping very fast. We have to become much more adaptable than we were in the past. In earlier days, we had time to adapt to things. Now you got to think while you're running. You can't stop and say, hey, what's going on? You don't have that luxury anymore.
Like as long as you are working or as long as you are living.
Either way, both ways. It doesn't matter. Let's say if my mom was alive, she would be in her 100 and something.
Yeah.
And if she was alive and I had to communicate with her, and I live in the US, if I live here and she lives in India, other than the phone and video calls, she would have to learn how to do video calls, right? She would have to learn email or some way of handling a smart device. You have, I mean, there's like here in the US, a lot of elderly people don't use smartphones, they use feature phones. But how do you get Uber when you want to move from place to place? So there's an app called Go Go Grandparents, where for $1 extra you call them, they'll do the Uber for you, all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting how things come up to support people who are unwilling to change, or unwilling to accept or think they can't use the new technology the way it is.
Mm. The main thing is hopefully we will leave much more better, peaceful, or in a content way down the line. That's the hope we
Yeah.
can do.
Better quality of life. I think
Better
that's
quality
really
of
what
life.
I tell all these startups. They say, why are you working? Two reasons. One is, yeah, as long as I can create jobs, I think I should work. And the second is, I've got to encourage you guys so that when I get older, I'll have a better quality of life. You'll do technology breakthroughs that will help improve my quality of life. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Thank you,
much.
Sirji. Thank you.